Hey guys, this is Charlesy, and my presentation today is about restraint asphyxia, and basically that is when officers have to subdue a person that's exhibiting a lot of agitated behavior, and they decide to restrain them face down, but we'll get into that during the slide. So here we go. We're going to start with use of force incidents. Okay, so what happens when there is a use of force incident? Well, it starts with a violent confrontation. And when a violent confrontation happens, then the police may use different means to subdue the person. They can use several officers, handcuffs, leg restraints, or a combination of all of those things. So what does the individual exhibit that requires such restraints? Well, usually it's a drug-induced agitation or an agitation that the officers believe is associated with mental illness. So now we're gonna go in to see some statistics about this. Media likes to play up, you know, how horrible our LEOs are right now, and they'd like you to believe that every day, you know, somebody dies because the cops did something they weren't supposed to. So let's go into some statistics and see what we can find. Okay, so what we'll see here is actually that restraint-related statistics for death. The research has shown that a sudden in-custody restraint death is actually very rare. And from 1996 to 2004, there was approximately 45 million citizens that came in contact with police officers. Out of those 45 million, 550,000 resulted in a use of force or a threat of use of force. See, that's where statistics get a little crazy, because it doesn't necessarily mean they actually did use it, but they may have threatened to use it. So really, 550,000 out of 45 million is not that bad. Out of those 550,000, the use of force scenarios, only 25, that's it, 25 people. Not that even one is okay, but I'm just saying 25 resulted in a restraint-related death. So let's look at that. 45 million people, that's the number of citizens. 75 people. So what does that give you? That right there. That's the percentage of restraint-related deaths from 1996 to 2004. Okay. Bear with me. Sorry, guys. I am not a Prezi presenter. So let's go into the law and science behind restraint. Okay, so what happens? What happens when, you know, the cops have to use restraints and say, unfortunately, due to that, one of these 25 out of all these millions of people, they die? Well, what's more than likely going to happen is, after the death occurs, a civil lawsuit is most likely going to be filed against the officers and the agency that were involved for an alleged wrongful death. The inquiry into the case of death will focus on, specifically, whether the officer's restraint procedures contributed to the person's death. So we got to make that clear, whether the officer's procedures were what resulted in the death. Well, the plaintiff, he and his counsel are going to utilize medical experts that support the hypothesis that the procedures directly contributed to the death, regardless of the cause and the manner. This is the position behind this presentation, positional restraint asphyxia, which is the restraint in the prone position, face down position, basically lying on your belly. They're also going to claim the use of the prone restraint and the weight that was applied to the back of the subject, because usually if the officers are going to subdue you on your belly, they're going to be putting and applying pressure by their arms, legs, knees to the back of the body. If that interfered with the ventilation mechanics of a normal person, like basically the breathing, which would cause asphyxia, and that would result in death. Well, the defendant, so that would be, your defense counsel plus the officers or the agency that's being charged with this alleged wrongful death, they're going to also use their expert witnesses, and they're going to utilize some of the physiological studies and the science behind those studies of the restraints of a combative person, and they're going to get into depth of what restraints were used and combinations of restraints, and see if it is even possible that could result in asphyxia. Of course, both parties will request that police experts examine the officers' use of force and their techniques. Were they justified in using their force and techniques on the person due to the amount of violence that person, the subject, exhibited? All right, so we're going to get into research and experiments. Let's see what we've got here. Surprisingly enough, studies did not find supportive evidence to show that being placed in the prone, face down belly position and restrained significantly would compromise our ventilation portion of our bodies. That's basically our breathing, how we get air in and out. Then, no evidence that being restrained, hogtied, and exposed to pepper spray could cause that amount of compromise to ventilation of a person that would cause them to actually die from asphyxia. And we go again. Being restrained, hogtied, or placed in a prone position with weight on the back did not support the claims of ventilation compromise. We talked about that just a little bit ago, that, if an officer is going to have to restrain you in the prone position, then yes, they're going to be applying some weight to the back of your body. Well, this is saying it doesn't matter how much weight they were putting on the back of your body, it is not going to compromise your normal ability to breathe and get oxygen into your body. All studies that were done formed the conclusion that being restrained with or without the use of pepper spray and or that the weight would not contribute to any pulmonary distress that would cause asphyxia. Pulmonary meaning lungs and your ability to breathe. So that was actually very surprising, that there was nothing that they found that actually could contribute to claims of prone position asphyxia. So we're going to make our conclusions here. This is a summary of what I found through the study. Physiological science clarifies that restraint position and or procedures do not support sudden death from ventilatory compromise. So basically what they're saying is all the studies that they did, that the science behind it says no, that the position, the prone position, and the procedures that they have to use to get you into that prone position, either weight to the back of your body, hog tying you, even use of pepper spray, would not compromise your ability to breathe to the point that it would cause you asphyxia and you would die. Okay. Factors that are most likely to contribute to sudden violent restraint death would include other things that you yourself already have going on with you. Excited delirium, drug intoxication, mental illness, stress, trauma, hyperstimulation, and internal organ deficiencies. That's very important because what they're saying is these deaths that they have found, they weren't due to what the officers had done. They're actually due to the person themselves already having some type of medical issue, some kind of type of deficiency. And they're saying it's often linked to a chronic drug abuse, alcohol abuse or drug abuse. Scientific experiments conclude that restraining an agitated person cannot, say it again, cannot lead to significant hypoxia. Hypoxia is basically lack of oxygen in the blood, or, to the brain. Unless there is some pre-existing, let's zoom in, pre-existing problem with central cardiac output, peripheral oxygen extrication, or oxygen utilization. Positional asphyxia or physical activity does not cause life-threatening hypoxia. Basically, what they're trying to tell you is, even if the person was so agitated and they had gotten so worked up and like they had just ran a 10-mile marathon, it still would not matter. Putting a person in the prone position and applying the restraint is not going to cause them to die. That's pretty much what they're trying to say. Okay, so my work cited, it came from this beautiful article that was one of our options, and it was written by the author that also wrote our textbook, Mr. Ross here, Science, Liability, Use of Force, and Restraint Asphyxia. I retrieved it on May 23rd, and that is the link. So if you're interested in reading that article and doing your own research, perhaps, you can have a nice little start there. And that is pretty much the end of my presentation. I definitely thank you all for bearing with me. Like I said, that's been my very first Prezi presentation, and I've had to record this myself. So thank you, God bless, and I hope that you learned as much as I did.